In this video, we explore the cases of young individuals who were executed in the United States for crimes committed as minors. We will look at details about their crimes, the judicial process they faced, their last meal, and their final words before execution. Welcome to Criminal Records. On July 2, 1977, 17-year-old Dalton Prejean and three friends, after drinking at several bars, were in a 1966 Chevrolet when they were stopped by State Police Officer Donald Cleveland in Lafayette Parish. The officer had signaled them to pull over due to the vehicle's taillights being out. After an altercation with his brother Joseph, Dalton Prejean, upset by the way he was treated, pulled out a .38 caliber revolver and shot Officer Cleveland, who was hit twice and killed. Dalton and his companions fled, but they were arrested hours later. Dalton Prejean was convicted of Officer Cleveland's murder, and despite his low IQ and history of mental health issues, the jury sentenced him to death in 1978. After years of appeals, including one to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1990, his sentence was upheld. On April 17, 1990, one day before his execution, he was offered a last meal. Prejean requested a seafood platter and an orange soda. On May 18, 1990, Dalton Prejean was executed in the electric chair at Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola. During the execution, 24 family members of Officer Cleveland were present in the witness room. When asked for his last words, he said, "Nothing will be accomplished. I am at peace with myself. I would like to thank everyone who has supported me through all these years. I would also like to thank my loved ones for being strong. My son will be a better person by not letting something like this ruin his life. Stay strong, keep fighting, keep praying." They said it wasn't about revenge, but it's hard for me to see it, to understand it. I hope they find happiness. So, I give up my life. I send my love to everyone. God bless you all. Dalton was pronounced dead at 9:14 p.m. Johnny Frank Garrett, State, Texas. Johnny Frank Garrett, 17 years old, in 1981, attacked a 76-year-old nun named Tadia Benz, who was his neighbor. Sister Tadia lived in a convent near Garrett's home. On the morning of October 31st, Garrett entered the convent and, after sexually assaulting her, took her life. On November 9, 1981, Garrett was arrested and charged with the crime. Garrett was tried and sentenced to death. His execution was scheduled for January 6, 1992, but the intervention of Pope John Paul II, requesting clemency, led to a temporary reprieve by the governor. This changed the course of the execution. Although he was offered a hearing to commute his sentence to life imprisonment, the death penalty was upheld. He was examined by Dr. Dorothy Otno Lewis, who determined that Garrett had multiple personalities due to abuse suffered during his childhood. Finally, he was executed on February 11, 1992, at the age of 28, by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. One day before his execution, he was offered a last meal. Garrett requested strawberry and chocolate ice cream. When asked for his last words, Garrett replied, "I would like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me. The rest of the world can kiss my ever-loving ass." He was pronounced dead at 6:10 p.m. Charles Rumbaugh, State, Texas. On April 4, 1975, Charles Rumbaugh, at 17 years old, shot and killed the owner of a jewelry store in Amarillo, Michael Fiorillo, 58, during a robbery. A few days before the jewelry store robbery, Rumbaugh had already used 2 guns to rob a motel in San Angelo, taking $350. From an early age, Rumbaugh had a history of criminal behavior. Rumbaugh was arrested and charged with capital murder. After a trial in April 1976, the jury recommended the death penalty. During his time in prison, Rumbaugh escaped from the Potter County Jail with 2 other inmates in December 1975, but he was recaptured shortly after. On September 11, 1985, Charles Rumbaugh was executed by lethal injection in Texas. One day before his execution, he was offered a last meal, but Rumbaugh did not request a special final meal. When asked for his last words, Rumbaugh said, "DJ, Lori, Doctor, Wheat, all I can say is goodbye, and to the rest of you, although you may not forgive my transgressions, I forgive yours against me. I am ready to begin my journey, and that is all I have to say." Glenn Charles McGinnis, State, Texas. On August 1, 1990, a customer entered Wilkins Dry Cleaners in Conroe, Texas, and discovered the body of employee Lita Wilkerson lying face up on the floor, lifeless. On the counter, a stack of jeans with the name McGinnis written on the pockets was found, and $140 was missing from the cash register. The next day, McGinnis was arrested at his aunt's house near the dry cleaners. In his possession were $105 and a .25 caliber pistol, which turned out to be the murder weapon. On October 8, 1990, McGinnis was charged with the murder of Lita Wilkerson while committing a robbery. He was sentenced to death on July 30, 1992. His appeal was denied by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in 1994. On January 25, 2000, McGinnis was executed by lethal injection in the state of Texas. McGinnis did not speak any last words before his execution, nor did he request a final meal. Douglas Christopher Thomas, State, Virginia. On November 3, 1990, in the quiet town of Virginia, Douglas Christopher Thomas, 17 years old, was in a relationship with Jessica Wiseman, 14 years old. Jessica's parents, Kathy and James B. Wiseman, disapproved of the relationship and pressured their daughter to end it. However, Jessica was determined to be with Thomas, and that night, in a fit of frustration, the two devised an extreme plan. With a shotgun in hand, Thomas arrived at the Wiseman house. Jessica, determined to help her boyfriend, guided him to the house and did everything she could to help him enter through a window. There, Thomas first shot James, who died instantly. Kathy, though injured, was still alive. It was then that Jessica, without hesitation, asked Thomas to finish her off as well. Thomas obeyed, and with another shot he ended Kathy's life. After his arrest, Thomas confessed to the crime. During the trial, the judges concluded that the death penalty was appropriate. His defense attempted to change the venue due to extensive media coverage, but the request was denied. On the other hand, Jessica Wiseman, considered an accomplice in the crime, was tried as a minor and sentenced to only 7 years in prison. She was released when she turned 21. One day before his execution, Thomas was offered a last meal. He requested fried chicken. There were no official last words recorded, but days before his execution, Thomas said in a news interview, "It overwhelms me that Jessica only got 7 years and is free to resume her normal life while I am 4 days away from paying the ultimate price for something we both participated in. I made the wrong decision, so I can't be mad at anyone but myself. But I don't think America should execute juvenile offenders because that basically means saying we have no chance at rehabilitation." On January 10, 2000, Douglas Christopher Thomas was executed by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. Ruben Montoya Cantu, State, Texas. In November 1984, Ruben Cantu and his friend David Garza, both teenagers in San Antonio, Texas, committed a robbery at a house under construction During the assault, they killed Pedro Gomez and seriously injured Juan Moreno, who survived the attack. After the crime, the two teenagers fled, and although Moreno initially did not identify Cantu, he eventually recognized him as one of the attackers. Ruben Cantu was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. During his time on death row, doubts arose about his guilt, especially after the district attorney at the time, Sam Millsap, questioned his decision to convict him, suggesting that Cantu might have been innocent. Despite these doubts, the conviction was upheld. One day before his execution, Cantu was offered a last meal. He requested chewing gum, but it was denied. On August 24, 1993, at 12:22 a.m., Ruben Cantu was executed by lethal injection at the age of 26, becoming the fifth juvenile offender executed in Texas. Cantu was asked if he wished to say anything before his execution, to which he replied, "No, sir." He was pronounced dead at 12:29 a.m. Years later, Moreno and Garza retracted their initial statements, claiming that Ruben Cantu was not the real perpetrator of the crime. Moreno pointed out that the shooter had very curly hair, which sparked significant controversy over time. In 2007, a final resolution was issued in which Judge Reed published a report concluding that Cantu was guilty of the crime for which Texas executed him in 1993. However, this report has been questioned by critics who argue that it is biased because Reed was the same judge who denied Cantu's appeal in 1988 and set his execution date for 1993. Toronto Patterson, State, Texas. On June 6, 1995, Toronto Patterson, 17 years old, arrived at his great-aunt's house looking for a BMW. Kimberly Brewer was at the residence and welcomed him. Later, Patterson returned with a .38 caliber revolver. In the living room, he fired a shot at Kimberly. Ollie, 3 years old, and Jennifer, 6 years old, were also present. Both children were hit by the gunfire while Patterson continued his rampage. After the incident, Patterson removed 3 of the 4 wheels from the BMW and loaded them into his grandmother's car before leaving. Later, he tried to sell the wheels but was unsuccessful. That same day, the police arrested him and found small bloodstains on his clothes. At first, he denied responsibility, but later admitted to the crime. He was prosecuted for the case of Ollie Brown, as Texas law considered his age to make the crime one of the utmost severity. On November 20th, 1995, he was sentenced to the death penalty. One day before his execution, Patterson received his last meal: 6 pieces of crispy fried chicken, 4 jalapenos, 4 buttermilk biscuits with butter, chef's salad with bacon bits, black olives, ham, and Italian dressing, 6 Sprites, and white cake with white icing. On August 28, 2002, Toronto Patterson received a lethal injection at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. Before the procedure, he expressed his last words: "I'm sorry for the pain. I'm sorry for what I caused my friends, family, and loved ones. I feel a great responsibility and guilt for what happened. I should be punished for the crime, but I don't think I should die for a crime I didn't commit." Patterson was pronounced dead at 6:17 p.m. Napoleon Beasley, State, Texas. On April 19, 1994, Napoleon Beasley, 17 years old, along with Cedric and Donald Coleman, planned to steal a Mercedes-Benz. They waited for John Luttis, a 63-year-old businessman, to arrive home and park the vehicle in his garage. Beasley approached him and shot him, ending his life. He then attempted to kill Lutig's wife, but failed. She managed to survive by pretending to be dead. After the crime, Beasley and his accomplices fled in the stolen car. Beasley was arrested shortly afterward. The Coleman brothers testified against him and received 40-year prison sentences. Beasley, however, was sentenced to death on October 28, 1994. His appeals dragged on for years, but all were denied. One day before his execution, Beasley was offered a last meal. He made no special requests. On May 28, 2002, Napoleon Beasley was executed by lethal injection at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. When asked for his last words, he said, "The act I committed to put me here was not just heinous, it was senseless. But the person that committed that act is no longer here. I'm sorry for what's happening here tonight. Not just for me, but for what's happening to me. I'm disappointed that a system that is supposed to protect and uphold what is just and right can be so much like me when I made the same shameful mistake." Beasley was pronounced dead at 6:17 p.m. J. Kelly Pinkerton, State, Texas. In 1979, J. Kelly Pinkerton, 17 years old, broke into the home of Sarah Dawn Lawrence in Amarillo, Texas, with the intent to rob her. During the assault, he brutally attacked her, stabbing her multiple times. A year later, in 1980, he murdered Sherry Welch, a 25-year-old woman who worked at a furniture store. Pinkerton was arrested in 1981, and after an investigation, he was found guilty of both murders. In separate trials, he was sentenced to death. He spent nearly 7 years on death row, filing several appeals, all of which were denied. His execution was scheduled for 1986. One day before his execution, Pinkerton was offered a last meal. He requested 2 cheeseburgers with fries, onions, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise, accompanied by a cola drink. On May 15, 1986, J. Kelly Pinkerton was executed by lethal injection at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. He became the 16th person to be executed after the reinstatement of the death penalty in the United States in 1976. His father, Gene Pinkerton, was the only family member present at the execution and held onto a railing as he watched his son die. When asked for his last words, he replied, "Be strong for me. I want you to know that I'm at peace with myself and with my God. I talked to everyone on the phone. I got to talk to Mom, tell Mom goodbye, keep your spirits up for me." He then sang, "I bear witness to Allah. I ask for your forgiveness." Before dying, his final words were, "I feel dizzy. I feel dizzy." He was pronounced dead at 12:25 a.m. Sean Sellers, State, Oklahoma. On March 5, 1986, Sean Sellers murdered his mother, Vonda Bellafato, and his stepfather, Lee Bellafato, while they slept in their Oklahoma City home. He wore only his underwear to avoid getting bloodstains on his clothes. To divert attention from himself, Sellers attempted to alter the crime scene to make it look like a burglary. Sometime later, Sellers confessed to the 1985 murder of Robert Paul Bauer, a 32-year-old employee at a Circle K convenience store who had refused to sell him beer. At his trial, Sellers claimed he was practicing Satanism at the time of the murders and insisted he was possessed by a demon named Ezurate. The defense also argued that Sellers was obsessed with the game Dungeons and Dragons, although he himself denied that the game had any connection to his crimes. The jury did not find his claims valid and convicted him of first-degree murder in 1986. Since Oklahoma law at the time did not allow for life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, Sellers was sentenced to death. While in prison, Sellers converted to Christianity and began appearing on television shows such as The Oprah Winfrey Show and Geraldo, as well as in documentaries about Satanism and serial killers. During his appeals in 1999, Sellers argued that he suffered from dissociative identity disorder. However, the court ruled that the timing of his diagnosis was too late and could not be used as grounds for an appeal. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to review his case. As his execution approached, various organizations and public figures, including the European Union, Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Bianca Jagger, condemned his execution due to his age at the time of the crime and his alleged rehabilitation. One day before his execution, Sellers was offered a last meal. He requested Chinese food, spring rolls, sweet and sour shrimp, and fried shrimp. On February 4, 1999, Sean Sellers was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. At 12:17 a.m., 5 minutes after the lethal drugs were administered, he was pronounced dead. When asked for his last words, Sellers addressed his step-siblings. "All of you who hate me right now and are here waiting to watch me die, when you wake up in the morning, you won't feel any different. You'll hate me just as much as you did tonight. When you wake up and nothing has changed inside you, turn to God, and He will be there for you. Turn to God, and He will heal you. Let Him touch your hearts. Don't hate for the rest of your lives. I love you all." He then began singing Christian music and before receiving the lethal injection exclaimed, "Here I go, Father. I'm coming home. Let's do it, Gary. Let's get started." Finally, he sang, "Release my spirit so I can praise you. Release my spirit so I can worship you." On March the 23rd, 1944, in the small town of Alkaloo, South Carolina, two girls, Betty June Binnicker, 11 years old, and Mary Emma Thames, 8 years old, were found dead in a ditch. That same day, George Stinney Jr., a 14-year-old African-American boy, was arrested on suspicion of the crime. According to the official version, Stinney allegedly confessed after being interrogated without the presence of a lawyer or his parents. The trial took place on April 24, 1944, in the city of Sumter, South Carolina. It was an extremely quick process. Jury selection and the trial itself took less than a day. Stinney's defense did not present any witnesses or evidence in his favor. The jury, composed exclusively of white men, deliberated for just 10 minutes before declaring Stinney guilty. He was sentenced to die in the electric chair. On June 16, 1944, George Stinney Jr. was executed in the electric chair at the South Carolina State Penitentiary. Due to his young age and small frame, the mask used to cover his face was too large, causing it to slip during the execution. When asked for his last words, he simply said, "No, sir." In December 2014, after decades of questions about the legality of his trial, a South Carolina judge overturned his conviction, arguing that Stinney had not received a fair trial and that his confession had likely been coerced. With this, George Stinney Jr. was officially exonerated 70 years after his execution. In 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court abolished the death penalty for minors in the case Roper v. Simmons.